Ethan never liked crowded places, but working on the Grand Rim trade station meant living in one of the busiest hubs in this sector of space. The air always smelled faintly of coolant and cooked food, and the sound of engines humming never really stopped. Ships came and went every hour, and every kind of alien species passed through the docking bays. Ethan, a human mechanic, usually kept to himself, focusing on repairing damaged panels, broken airlocks, or malfunctioning thrusters. On that day, he was fixing a jammed hangar door in Bay 12. His hands were greasy, and he was halfway inside an access panel when someone's shadow fell over him. "You're in my way," a voice said. Ethan pulled his head out, squinting against the station's bright lights. Standing in front of him was a tall alien woman with sleek black hair, sharp golden eyes, and a presence that made everyone else step aside. She wore dark armor that clung to her form, and two curved blades rested on her hips. He recognized her. Instantly, Karen of the Felra. The Felra were not just warriors. They were hunters, feared across multiple star systems. Station crews whispered stories about her, how she once defeated an entire squad of mercenaries alone, how her claws could tear through armor, and how she never smiled. Ethan should have been intimidated. Instead, he just wiped his hands on a rag and looked up at her. "You know," he said casually, "if you stand there any longer, people might think you're here to help." Several dock workers nearby froze, their eyes wide. Nobody talked to Karen like that. Her golden eyes narrowed. "Are you mocking me, human?" "No," Ethan replied, smirking. "Just pointing out you're blocking my light. Unless, of course, you plan to take over fixing this door." For a long moment, she stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, without a word, she stepped aside. Ethan went back to work, but he could feel her gaze on him the entire time. Later, in the mess hall, Ethan sat alone, eating a plate of fried noodles. The station was buzzing with gossip, people whispering that Karen had been seen watching, a human mechanic. It was absurd to them. She didn't interact with anyone unless it was for a job. And yet the next day, there she was again. Ethan was checking a docking clamp when he spotted her leaning against the bulkhead, arms crossed, watching him like a predator studying prey. "Do you just follow people around for fun?" he asked. "Or am I special?" Her ear twitched slightly, a subtle movement he almost missed. "I want to understand you," she said simply. "Me? I'm just a mechanic." "Exactly," she replied. "You should fear me, but you don't. Why?" Ethan shrugged. "Maybe because you haven't given me a reason to." Her eyes studied him for a long time before she turned and walked away. Over the next week, their strange encounters continued. Sometimes she'd appear while he was working, silently watching. Sometimes she'd ask questions about human food, human fighting styles, human humor. She seemed confused by the fact that Ethan would tease her about small things, like her serious expression or the way she tilted her head when she didn't understand something. One evening, he sat in the mess hall again, and this time, she sat across from him without asking. The room went silent. "You really like making people stare, don't you?" Ethan said. "Their opinions don't matter," Karen replied, calmly eating from her plate. "But your reactions do." He chuckled. "I'm starting to think you just enjoy the banter." She didn't answer, but there was the faintest flicker of something in her golden eyes. Amusement, maybe. Still, Ethan knew better than to think they were friends. The Felra were dangerous, and she had a reputation that wasn't built on rumors alone. Yet for some reason, he wasn't afraid. Maybe it was because he could see something beyond her armor and sharp eyes. Maybe it was because, deep down, he sensed she was lonelier than she'd ever admit. And she, for reasons even she didn't understand yet, kept coming back. But as Ethan would soon learn, teasing the deadliest alien girl alive was one thing. Earning her trust was something else entirely. And the galaxy had a way of throwing people together when they least expected it. The first step had already been taken, and neither of them realized how far it would go. The next morning, Ethan woke to the usual sound of the docking alarms, another shipment arriving. He rolled out of his bunk, still half asleep, and grabbed his work jacket. The station's corridors were busy as ever, with traders, mercenaries, and crew members moving through the wide halls. He had a routine: fix what was broken, eat when there was time, and avoid unnecessary trouble. But Karen didn't seem to care about routines, especially his. As he stepped into Bay 7 to check a damaged cargo loader, he saw her again, leaning against a metal pillar, arms crossed, watching. "You're early today," Ethan said, walking over to the loader. "I was curious to see if humans always work before eating," Karen replied. "Yeah, that's called having a job," Ethan said, smirking. She tilted her head slightly, the way she often did when processing something. "Humans joke even when tired. That's strange. It's called coping. Try it sometime," Ethan said, grabbing his tools. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked over and stood beside him, watching closely as he repaired the loader's hydraulics. "You have steady hands," she finally said. "Comes with the job," Ethan replied, tightening a bolt. "You have sharp eyes. Comes with being you, I guess." Her golden eyes met his, and for a moment there was a flicker of something. Interest, maybe. Later that day, Ethan went to the mess hall for a late lunch. The room was nearly empty, but as soon as he sat down, Karen appeared and took the seat across from him again. "You know, people are starting to think we're friends," Ethan said. "Are we not?" she asked. He paused, caught off guard. "Depends what your definition of a friend is. Someone you do not wish to harm. Someone you trust," she said, as if testing the word on her tongue. "Then I guess maybe we are," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. "Unless you're planning to stab me later." She looked at him with that unreadable expression again. "Not today." The next few days passed in a strange rhythm. Wherever Ethan went, Karen seemed to appear sooner or later. Sometimes she'd ask about his life on Earth, other times about human combat training. She seemed fascinated by the fact that humans fought in wars despite being physically weaker than many alien species. "You survive by using your mind," she said one afternoon. "Well, that, and a little stubbornness," Ethan replied. Then one night, everything changed. Ethan was in Bay 9 repairing a docking clamp when the station's alarm blared. A voice crackled over the comm. "All personnel, secure the bays! Raider attack incoming!" Before he could react, Karen was at his side. "Stay behind me," she ordered. "I'm not hiding," Ethan replied, grabbing a wrench from his belt. The bay doors burst open and armed raiders poured in, 4 of them wearing mismatched armor and carrying blasters. Karen moved like lightning, her blades flashing as she disarmed one raider and sent another crashing into a cargo crate. Ethan ducked behind a crate for cover, but when one raider tried to flank her, he swung his wrench hard, knocking the blaster from their hands. Karen finished the fight in seconds, her movements efficient and deadly. When it was over, she turned to him, golden eyes sharp. "You fought," she said, almost as if she hadn't expected it. "What did you think I was going to do? Hide under a table?" Ethan said. A faint sound escaped her, almost like a laugh, though it was so quiet he nearly missed it. Most would. After the security team arrived and cleared the bay, Karen didn't leave his side. "You put yourself in danger for me," she said as they walked back toward the crew quarters. "You were outnumbered." "I couldn't just watch," Ethan replied. She studied him for a moment, then gave a short nod. "You are not like other humans I've met." From that night on, their dynamic shifted. She still teased him about being slow or fragile, but there was a new layer to it, something that felt almost protective. Ethan noticed she positioned herself near him in crowded spaces and always seemed to watch the exits. And though he didn't say it out loud, he realized he was doing the same for her. What neither of them knew was that this was just the beginning. The galaxy had a habit of throwing strangers together in dangerous ways, and soon they would be tested in a place far away from the safety of the trade station. For now, though, their strange friendship was growing, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's sharp golden eyes didn't just see a mechanic anymore. She was starting to see something more. 3 days after the raider attack, Station Command summoned Karen to a briefing. Surprisingly, they also requested Ethan's presence. He wasn't sure why. He was a mechanic, not a soldier. But Karen didn't question it. Inside the command room, the station's captain explained the situation. A group of raiders had established a hidden base on a frozen moon in the outer sector. Their stolen cargo included sensitive tech that could destabilize nearby colonies if sold. A small team was being sent to locate and mark the base for destruction. Karen was chosen as the lead, and Ethan was apparently the assigned engineer for the mission. "We need someone to keep our transport running if things go bad," the captain said. "You were recommended." Ethan gave a flat look. "Recommended? By who?" Karen didn't answer, but her tail flicked slightly, a subtle sign he was starting to recognize as amusement. The mission began the next morning. Their small ship lifted off from the trade station, heading toward the frozen moon. Besides Karen and Ethan, there were 2 other crew members, a human pilot named Riley and a Saurian scout named Taver. The trip was quiet at first. Karen spent most of her time checking weapons and reviewing maps, while Ethan worked on the ship's heating systems. It was going to be far below freezing where they were headed. About 6 hours into the journey, everything went wrong. And unexpected ion storms swept across their path, slamming into the ship with violent force. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the engines sputtered. "We're losing power," Riley shouted from the cockpit. Ethan rushed to the engine room, fighting to keep the system stable, but the storm's interference fried several control circuits. The ship began to drop fast. "Brace for impact!" Taver roared. They crashed hard on the icy surface, skidding across frozen ground until the ship came to a shuddering stop. The hull was intact, but the engines were badly damaged, and the storm was still raging outside. "Engines won't be ready for at least 12 hours, Ethan said, panting. "Maybe more if the storm keeps frying circuits." "Then we wait," Karen said firmly. "We set up shelter and keep watch." Using emergency supplies, they set up a collapsible survival tent inside a rocky outcrop for cover. The wind outside howled, carrying icy shards that could cut exposed skin. Inside, the temperature was still freezing, but at least the walls kept most of the wind out. As night fell, the temperature dropped even lower. Their small heater struggled to keep up, and frost began forming on the inside of the tent walls. "You're shivering," Karen said, watching Ethan wrap his arms around himself. "I'm fine," he lied, his teeth chattering. Her golden eyes narrowed. "You are not fine." Without another word, she moved closer and pulled a thick survival blanket from her pack. "Here," she said, throwing it over both of them. Thanks," Ethan muttered, unsure where to put his hands. "Stay still," she said. "Felra, body heat is higher than human. You'll warm faster this way." The closeness was unexpected. Karen's presence radiated warmth, and he could hear the faint, steady sound of her breathing. Despite the freezing temperature, he felt himself relax. After a while, her voice broke the silence. "You risked yourself in the bay. Why?" "Because you're my teammate," Ethan said simply. "And maybe because I like annoying you too much to let you get killed." She tilted her head, and for the first time, there was a hint of a smile on her lips. Strange human. As the hours passed, the storm outside roared on. The others slept in their own blankets, but Ethan remained beside Karen, their shared warmth keeping them both from freezing. At some point, exhaustion took over, and he drifted off. When he woke again, it was still dark, and the storm still howled. But what caught his attention was Karen. She was resting against him, her head just under his chin, and a soft rhythmic sound was coming from her. Purring. He froze. The feared Felra hunter, the deadliest alien girl alive, was curled up on his chest, completely relaxed. For a long moment, he just lay there, unsure what to think. She wasn't doing it consciously. Her breathing was slow, her tail flicked lazily, and the purring was steady. He didn't move, not wanting to wake her. But he couldn't help the small smile forming on his face. Maybe she wasn't as untouchable as everyone thought. Outside, the storm slowly began to weaken. Morning would come soon, and with it, the next step of their mission. But for now, Ethan stayed still, letting her sleep. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he realized that something between them had changed. Morning came with a pale, cold light seeping through the tent walls. The storm had finally eased, leaving the frozen moon's surface eerily quiet. Ethan stirred first, feeling the weight against his chest. Karen was still there, asleep, breathing calm. He didn't dare move until her eyes slowly opened. For a second, there was no deadly glare, just the calm focus of someone waking from a deep rest. Then she seemed to realize their position and sat up, though not in a rush. "You didn't freeze?" she said. "Nope," Ethan replied with a small smile. "Guess your Felra heater system works." Her ear twitched slightly, and she stood, adjusting her gear. "The storm is over. We should move before the raiders realize we're here." Outside, the landscape stretched endlessly. White plains broken by jagged black rock formations. Their breath came out in clouds, and the crunch of their boots echoed in the still air. Taver led the way with a scanner. Riley followed with a rifle, and Ethan stayed near Karen. As they walked, she spoke without looking at him. "Last night. Felra do not rest like that near others. Not unless there is trust." He glanced at her. "So you trust me?" Her golden eyes met his briefly. Enough. They reached a high ridge and spotted smoke in the distance, a sign of the raider base. It was built into the side of a cliff, partially hidden by rock and snow. Taver crouched to study the scanner. "At least 20 heat signatures inside, maybe more underground." "Too many to fight head-on," Karen said. "We go in quiet, mark their supply caches, and call for an airstrike once we're out." Ethan's job was to plant small beacon devices that would allow the station's ships to target the base. It sounded simple until they were crawling on their stomachs through a narrow ice tunnel that opened behind the raider outpost. Inside, the air was warmer, smelling of oil and burnt metal. Voices echoed through the halls. Karen took point, moving like a shadow, her blades ready but unused. Ethan followed close, his heart pounding. At the first storage room, Karen signaled him forward. He knelt, attached a beacon to a support beam, and activated it. The device hummed softly, its light blinking green. They moved to the next room, but halfway there, footsteps approached. Karen grabbed him by the collar and pulled him into the shadows behind a stack of crates. 2 raiders walked past, laughing about something in their guttural language. Ethan felt Karen's hand still gripping his jacket, steadying him. When the hall was clear, she released him. "You're quiet for a mechanic," she whispered. "Guess I'm learning from the best," he whispered back. They planted 3 more beacons before reaching the largest chamber, filled with stolen weapons, fuel cells, and crates of unknown tech. Ethan began setting the final beacon, but a sharp voice rang out. "Hey, you don't belong here!" 3 raiders stood at the doorway, weapons raised. Before they could fire, Karen moved. She was a blur, closing the distance in seconds. Her first strike disarmed 1 raider, her second sent another sprawling. Ethan ducked behind a crate as blaster shots lit up the room. He grabbed a loose cable from the floor, swung it around 1 raider's legs, and pulled hard, sending them crashing. Down. Karen finished the fight quickly, breathing steady despite the sudden chaos. "Time to go," she said, pulling him toward the exit. The alarm began to blare. Lights flashed red as raiders poured into the hallways. Tavor and Riley's voices. Came over the comm saying they were already under fire. We split, Karen ordered. I'll clear the path to the ridge. You follow me. They ran through the narrow tunnels, dodging blaster fire. At one point, a shot grazed Ethan's arm, burning through his jacket. He stumbled, but Karen caught him, pulling him behind. Cover! You're hit, she said, checking the wound. Just a scratch, he replied through clenched teeth. She tore a strip from her cloak and wrapped it around his arm in quick, precise movements. Stay behind me, she said, her voice lower now, not a command, but a promise. They made it back to the ridge where Riley and Tavor waited, exchanging fire with pursuing raiders. Ethan signaled the beacons were all active, and Riley sent the coordinates to the station. Moments later, distant thunder rolled through the frozen air. Station gunships were inbound. As they retreated to their damaged ship, the sky behind them lit up with streaks of fire. The raider base was engulfed in explosions, the sound rumbling through the ice. Back inside the ship, Ethan slumped against a wall, exhausted. Karen sat beside him, her armor scorched in places. You did well, she said quietly. Thanks, he said, breathing hard. You weren't so bad yourself. For a moment, her golden eyes softened. When we return, others will speak of this mission. They will say the Felra hunter led it. But I will remember the human who planted the beacons while the galaxy's deadliest predators were at his back. Ethan chuckled. And here I thought you only kept me around for my mechanical skills. Her tail flicked once. Maybe. Outside, the frozen moon grew smaller as the ship rose into the dark sky. Neither of them said it, but they both knew the bond between them had grown stronger, built on danger, trust, and the knowledge that they had each other's backs no matter what came next. The return trip to the station was quieter than Ethan expected. Riley kept the ship steady. Tavor was already asleep in his seat, and Karen sat across from Ethan, her eyes half closed but alert. The steady hum of the engines filled the cabin. His arm still ached from the burn, but the makeshift bandage Karen had wrapped was holding. Every now and then, he caught her glancing at it as if making sure he was fine without having to ask. When the station finally came into view, relief swept over him. The docking process was smooth, and as the ramp lowered, warm air replaced the cold bite of the frozen moon. The station's docking bay was full of workers and security staff ready to hear about the mission. Tavor and Riley went ahead to debrief. Command. But Karen stayed close to Ethan. As they walked through the bay, a group of mercenaries, station regulars, stepped in their path. Their leader, a tall, scarred Gracht named Vorak, gave Ethan a slow look. So this is the human who ran around with the Felra hunter. Didn't think you'd make it back. Yeah, I hear that a lot, Ethan said, brushing past. Vorak's hand shot out, grabbing Ethan's shoulder. Watch your tone, little mechanic. Some of us don't like outsiders thinking they're heroes. Before Ethan could reply, Karen stepped forward. In one fluid motion, she grabbed Vorak's wrist and twisted it, forcing him to release Ethan. Her golden eyes burned into his. Touch him again, she said in a low, dangerous voice, and you will not have a hand to work with. Vorak froze, then stepped back, muttering something under his breath before leaving with his crew. Ethan gave a small laugh. I was handling it. No, Karen said, looking at him. You were being polite, and he was testing you. Well, thanks for stepping in, he said, rubbing his shoulder. You are under my protection now, she said simply, as if it was the most obvious thing in the galaxy. The words stuck with him all the way to the med bay, where a medic cleaned and wrapped his arm properly. Karen stood nearby, ignoring the curious looks from the staff. Later in the mess hall, the atmosphere shifted the moment they entered together. Conversations quieted, eyes followed them, and whispers spread. The feared Felra hunter was sitting at a table with a human mechanic sharing a meal. Ethan tried to ignore it, focusing on his plate of food. You know, he said, if you keep sitting with me, people are going to think we're... What? she asked, tilting her head. Friends, he finished. Her tail flicked once. We are, he chuckled. You say that like it's the simplest thing in the world. It is simple, she replied. You have fought beside me. You have not run. You have made me... She paused, searching for the word. Laugh. That is more than most. Ethan raised a brow. Wait, when did I make you laugh? You did not notice, but I did. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before a young technician approached their table. Excuse me, the tech said nervously, looking at Karen. Is it true you took on 3 raiders at once? Karen nodded slightly. With help. She gestured toward Ethan. The tech's eyes widened. You helped her? Just a little, Ethan said. The tech left, and Karen leaned forward slightly. You see? The story is already changing. Soon they will say the human and the Felra fought side by side, and they will not laugh when they say it. The rest of the day passed without incident, but as night came, Ethan returned to his small crew quarters only to find Karen leaning against the wall outside his door. Everything okay? He asked. Your quarters are near the outer docking section, she said. Raiders sometimes send infiltrators after failed missions. You are a possible target now. He frowned. So you're here to stand guard? Yes, she said, plainly. You know, most people would just say, be careful, and walk away. I am not most people, she said. He smiled faintly. Yeah, I've noticed. He let her in, and they both sat on opposite sides of the small room. There was no conversation for a while, just the quiet hum of the station through the walls. Eventually, Ethan leaned back on his bed, exhausted. Karen remained seated, watching the door like a sentry. He didn't remember falling asleep, but when he woke hours later, the lights were dim, and Karen was no longer in the chair. She was sitting on the floor beside the bed, her back against the wall, eyes closed, but ears twitching at every sound. She had kept watch all night. And for the first time, Ethan realized she wasn't just protecting him because of the mission. She was doing it because she wanted to. The next few days passed without any major problems. The raider base had been destroyed, and the station returned to its usual busy rhythm. Ethan went back to repairing ships, while Karen disappeared now and then for her own missions. But no matter where she went, she always seemed to appear again, watching him work, eating at the same table, or walking beside him in the crowded corridors. Rumors spread fast. Some said the feared Felra hunter had taken a human under her wing. Others whispered she was keeping him alive because he amused her. Ethan didn't care much for the gossip, but he noticed that no one messed with him anymore. Even the mercenaries who liked picking on newcomers gave him space. One evening, Ethan was finishing repairs on a shuttle when Karen appeared at the edge of the bay. You're working late, she said, trying to get this shuttle out before. Morning, he replied, wiping his hands. She stepped closer, her golden eyes studying him. You are tired? Part of the job, he said, smiling. She didn't smile back, but she moved to stand beside him, watching as he finished the last checks. When he shut the panel, she spoke again. Come with me. He raised a brow. Where? You'll see. He followed her through the station's quieter halls until they reached an observation deck. The wide window stretched across the wall, showing the endless dark of space, dotted with stars. A large planet glowed far below. Nice view, Ethan said. This is where I come to think, Karen said. After battles, after things I cannot explain. He glanced at her. And you brought me here because you have changed something, she said simply. I do not see you as just a human anymore. Ethan chuckled softly. So what am I now? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer until they were standing side by side. Someone I trust. Someone I protect. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the station. Then she added, someone I want near. Before Ethan could reply, an alert sounded over the station's comms. Security drill in the mess hall area. Karen moved quickly, and Ethan followed. When they arrived, they found a group of rowdy travelers arguing with station guards. One of them, a large reptilian, shoved past a guard and nearly knocked into Ethan. Karen reacted instantly, stepping between them, her hand on her blade. "Walk away," she said in a low voice. The reptilian froze, recognizing her, then backed off with a mutter. The crowd slowly dispersed, but many eyes stayed on Karen and Ethan. And that was when it happened. As the tension faded, Karen turned toward Ethan, scanning him for injuries. "You are unharmed?" "I'm fine," he said. But instead of stepping back, she stayed close. Then, without warning, she reached out, lightly grabbed his sleeve, and guided him to a seat against the wall. She sat beside him, and before he could react, she rested against him, head on his chest. Karen," he said quietly. "You are warm," she murmured. A soft, rhythmic sound began to rise from her, purring. It wasn't loud, but in the quiet that followed the commotion. People nearby could hear it. The mess hall went almost silent. Ethan froze for a second, then relaxed, letting her stay. He could feel her weight, steady and calm, and the vibration of her purring against his chest. Across the room, a few crew members stared openly. Some looked shocked, others almost afraid. Everyone knew Felra didn't show vulnerability, certainly not in public, but Karen didn't seem to care. Her golden eyes were half closed, her tail curled loosely, and she looked more at peace than he'd ever seen her. "You're kind of making a scene," Ethan said quietly. "Good," she replied simply. "Let them see." "See what?" "That the deadliest Felra hunter has chosen her human," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. He didn't have an answer for that. So he just stayed there, feeling the steady rhythm of her purr, aware of every pair of eyes watching, but strangely, not caring either. After a while, she sat up, but not before giving him a small look that said this wasn't a one-time thing. As they left the mess hall, the whispers started again, but this time they sounded different. Not mocking, but cautious. And Ethan realized something. He had teased the deadliest alien girl alive, survived her sharp eyes and sharper blades, stood beside her in battle, and now she trusted him enough to sleep on his chest in front of the entire station. The galaxy might still see her as a predator, but to him, she was something else entirely. And no matter what came next, he knew one thing. He wasn't letting that bond go.